Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
It is customary for us to go around the room and introduce ourselves to each other, and even though today is quite a sizable group, I invite you to still take an extra moment of breath and saying your name and help us to really sense your presence here today. I'll begin. I'm Len.
I'm Joe. George.
I'm John.
Jordan. David. Robert.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Adam.
Thomas. I'm Mike.
I'm Bob. I'm Lee.
I'm Jonathan.
Oh, yes.
Peter.
Doug.
Nathan.
Silas.
Richard.
Brian.
I'm Hal. Risha.
I'm Tom.
My name's Jack.
My name is Paul.
My name is Cal.
I'm Amos.
I'm Jack.
My name is Jerry. Dennis.
Jesse.
Patrick.
I'm Flint.
I'm Brad.
Dennis.
Dan.
My name's Rich.
Alan. I'm Jose.
My name is Alan.
And my name is Michael.
And I'm Sean.
Thank you for all being here. I'd like to welcome Sean Feit. Sean teaches the Dharma as a path of inquiry and integration and draws on 20 years of devotion to meditation and yoga. He was a monk in Burma in 2002 and has studied with many wonderful teachers, including Jack Kornfield, Sylvia Borstein, and Eugene Cash in terms of Dharma and meditation, David Moreno and Alice Jonau in terms of yoga, and Stephen Hoskinson for somatic experiencing. Sean teaches at Yoga Tree, Yoga Garden in San Francisco, Piedmont Yoga, and San Francisco Insight, and leads Kirtan, offering the practice of Bhakti Yoga as an integral aspect of a heart-centered path. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you. So, good morning. I'm really happy to be here again. I've been here with many of you several times now over the last handful of years. And I was asked to come today and speak about and sing about, perhaps. We'll definitely sing. Speak about the practice of devotion and what's called in Sanskrit bhakti, bhakti yoga or bhakti practice in relation to Buddhism and Dharma. So, to begin, just a couple of questions to have a sense of who's here. How many folks here would use the word Buddhist to identify yourself religiously? Let's use the word Buddhist. Right, so a small, very not majority. How many folks relate to or find some feeling arising in relation to traditional like iconography or images, like when you look up at the statue here? For how many folks does this kind of aspect of practice do something for you, okay, in your heart? Cool. So a slightly larger number. And that itself is interesting, that it's not exactly the same people as who would use the word Buddhist, and it's more people. So, how many folks here, perhaps like myself, found the Dharma or Buddhism or meditation as an aspect of a spiritual path that felt more, let's see, what's the way to phrase the question? How many folks have left or feel some distance from a religion or faith that you grew up in, like Catholicism or Judaism or anything else? Yeah, that's the majority, right? So, and me too. So I grew up Catholic here in California in a fairly liberal Catholic church, but still Catholic. Confession, priests, candles, communion, and I played the organ in my church when I was 13. So, but I actually did it not so much because I was a passionate Catholic. I didn't really know what it would even mean to be that. But actually taking the job of playing the music allowed me to not sit with my family out in the pews. And I got to sit up front with the musicians, where whenever we weren't playing, we would just chill and kind of sit back there and kind of whisper or just sit, and the priests would do their thing. And I didn't have to stand up, sit down, kneel, pray, sing, stand up, the whole deal. I was just like, is it time to play yet? Cool, it's time to play, And so it was a little bit of an escape. And like I think many of us, I came to Buddhism and the Dharma seeking something. And in my early 20s, I kind of stumbled through art school and then out into the world. And when I was 22, worked for a couple of months, got a temp job at an accounting firm down on Montgomery Street in the city here, living on Oak Street on a friend's floor. Earned a couple $100 over the course of a handful of weeks, not very much. And I thought, I could ride this into adulthood. Like I could just go from job to job here and get a slightly better job. Eventually I'd have a little apartment in San Francisco. Bless you. God willing, if I had done that, I probably would have an apartment right now that costs about $300 a month that I would never have let go of. And the accounting firm, was willing to hire me for more. And I remember a moment when a woman who worked at the firm was like, how much do they pay you? And I told her, and she was like, we can double your pay, and you'll work just for me, and we'll give you a full-time job. And I was just like, I kind of tossed around everything that could possibly mean in my head. And the next day I gave my notice at the accounting firm, took all of my cash, went to REI, bought a backpack, a stove, a sleeping bag, and some shoes, and took my violin, and within a week I was hitchhiking to New York. And I spent the next couple of years hitchhiking around. I went to New York, came back, moved around, and I ended up at a Zen monastery in New Mexico, where I met my first teacher and began intensive practice. And that was just about 20 years ago, just over. And so I was clearly looking for something, for some kind of clarity, for a path that would lead to something. I didn't even know, I think, what I even thought it would lead to. But I was determined to find my way. And that determination, I'll say, and this appears in the Buddhist texts, is really one of the first qualities, I think, that's important, that will take us into a lifetime of practice. And I found this tradition of the Buddha, or called the Dharma, that seemed to not ask me to venerate any deities. It's actually said there aren't any deities. It told me that the path to freedom was entirely walked by myself, that no one else could do it for me, and I didn't need anyone else. So this was good for an independent-minded, rebellious young man. It said, the priests can't do it for you, your parents can't do it for you, in fact, nobody has any, in a sense, authority over your own spiritual path. And especially in Zen, this was emphasized, and this really made sense to me. And so that made sense, but then here I am doing Zen practice, which involved, it was a very fairly traditional center, a lot of bowing and chanting and veneration, offering of incense and offerings to statues like this. So this is a statue of the Buddha, the historical Buddha Shakyamuni, in a gesture called the Earth Witness Mudra. A mudra is like a magical or mystical gesture. And the Earth Witness Mudra is whenever you see the Buddha reaching over his right knee to touch the earth. And it's a depiction of a very famous moment in the story of the Buddha on the night of his awakening. And these images then, in a way, given the orientation that I came into practice with, seemed initially a little paradoxical. Like, I'm hearing about this practice that says, through your own efforts alone, freedom arises. And, teachers and the tradition, they can point the way, but they can't walk the way for you. So your teachers are not divine, they're not gurus, they're not to be venerated as if divine. They're simply vehicles, in a way, for the passing on of the truths that this tradition maintains, that perhaps historically were initiated by the Buddha, but in this very special way where the Buddha isn't divine, but was just a man like us who suffered essentially based on the realization that old age, sickness, and death are unavoidable. And based on that realization, sought after truth in a very vigorous way, with profound dedication, realized the end of suffering, realized the answer, or realized through experience what was the end of his question around old age, sickness, and death, and then taught the path that led to that realization for the rest of his life. And in some ways, as Buddhism has come to the West, the aspect of it that is most prevalent in its home countries in South Asia, South and Southeast Asia, where, as a side note, I just was with my partner in Thailand and Laos for 3 weeks over the holidays. The primary manifestation of practice over there is not people meditating and inquiring to the nature of the self. There is that, but mostly people, and millions of them, right, go to the temple, make offerings, give money, do a lot of bowing and chanting. And I happen to now enjoy this part of practice, which is why I'm here today talking about it, and I love talking about it and being in it. But it's a completely, really different kind of practice than what came to the West. And the teachers that came here, I think quite wisely and appropriately for American culture, American and European culture, brought the practices of inquiry and meditation primarily, and left behind the practices of devotion and faith. How many people, when I even say the word faith, have a little trigger of uncomfortableness? It might be some of those who left the religion, right, when they grew up. It's a charged word for many of us in the West. And so sometimes I use it and sometimes I don't. I happen to have grown into a delight in kind of religion over the years. Probably that means I've sufficiently, kind of therapyized myself out of being traumatized by Catholicism. That also helps right now by the fact that we have a cool pope again, right? Who is So go Francis. But the word faith is charged, and the practices of devotion themselves can be charged, where it might feel, coming out of what for some folks was a very abusive childhood church, or for some just one that didn't have its meaning or didn't have soul in it in a way that we could connect with. The practices might feel like, wait, I came to the Buddha and the Dharma to get away from this, and now we're going to sing a praised song to this superhuman figure that we're bowing to, perhaps. And that can feel uncomfortable. So, as we explore some of the practices of devotion and faith, which we'll do today, partly I want to offer them in a way. It's kind of amazing to get to do this in the West, to encounter a tradition for whom we can feel devotion, but that isn't, this is a strong word, maybe I don't mean it with quite as so much punch, but tainted by the karma, right, by the actions of, let's say, a tradition that you may have grown up in, whose actions, especially lately, have been revealed as less than exemplary, right? I can be devoted to the Buddha in a way that's very different than the way I was trained to be devoted to Jesus or God or Mary. And that because of that newness, this is the blessing of being converts to a foreign religion, it can be fresh. And it doesn't have to mean what that religion meant. And I'll offer a couple possible ways to understand this. One way to understand this is through a list of qualities that appears in the Buddhist texts. It's a list that's not very often taught about. It's not as common as like the Four Noble Truths or the Eightfold Path. But the beginning part of the list, especially the first few qualities in the list, really speak to this, to the possibilities of devotion on our path, of devotion being a support for each of us on our path. And it's a list called Transcendent Dependent Origination, and you don't need to remember that unless you're that sort who likes those kind of names. It's a list that speaks about the pathway from suffering to freedom, and from bondage to freedom, or suffering to the end of suffering. And the beginning of the list is very interesting. It says, the path to freedom begins by understanding one thing, and that thing is dukkha, or suffering. And if you hang out with Buddhists long enough, which is to say 5 or 10 minutes, inevitably someone starts talking about suffering, right? You're like, oh, it's about suffering. Dissatisfaction is another nice translation for dukkha. And many of us, certainly myself, came to this practice probably rooted in an initial recognition of suffering. It's a little bit like, if you didn't have something you wanted to heal, why would you go to the doctor, right? If there wasn't something that needed addressing, or some issue that was painful, I wouldn't need to come and practice, to go through the difficulty of sitting still, of trying to focus the mind, of dealing with my own demons. And this was true for the Buddha as well. He was raised in a wealthy family. He was raised to have every physical comfort possible. And he talks about his multiple palaces and the good food, and how he was entertained constantly by bands of musicians who were all women. I guess that was considered like the best thing, in his time. All female musicians. And he paints a life basically of nonstop hedonism. And in some of the later traditions, they really paint it quite broadly. There's Chinese images of him standing there looking around at basically the morning after results of a kind of substance-fueled orgy, where there's like half-naked women and men strewn around the floor, sleeping kind of drunkenly. And he's looking around like he's freshly sober, and he's like, whoa, this is what I've been doing. And I kind of like that he had a period of that in his life, right? It's pretty fun. But he recognizes that a life of non-stop physical pleasure doesn't lead to permanent happiness. And he realizes this when he gets a hit of old age, sickness, and death. He sees an old person, he sees a sick person, he sees a corpse, and he asks his wiser friend, who's his driver, he says, could this happen to me? And the driver says, inevitably, actually, it's going to happen to all of us. And the Buddha can't deal with this truth. It's a little bit like he's a young raver at 18. I'm going to live forever, I'm going to learn how to fly, something like that, right? And he meets up with an older raver who doesn't really, party so much anymore. And the young Buddha is like, the party's going to last forever, right? And the old raver goes, no. And the Buddha's like, what do you mean? And this hit that we can't actually hold on to youth, we can't hold on to comfort, we can't hold on to health, we can't hold on to wealth and well-being, we can't hold on to our comfort, our conveniences. It hits all of us at some point. And if you're lucky, I think, it hits hard. If it doesn't hit hard, which is to say, if you are blessed with the kinds of circumstances where you think that you and comfortable San Francisco can just cruise for a good 60, 70, 80, 90 years, and then you'll die comfortably, surrounded by, beautiful people, and it's never going to really hurt that bad, that is kind of a heaven realm. But it's not true for most people, and it's probably not true for any of us here. So the Buddha gets this, and based on this recognition, there arises in him a determination to see if there's another way. And so this list, Transcendent Dependent Origination, begins by saying, the path starts by realizing one thing, and that is the reality of suffering, or the reality of loss. The second quality on the list is faith. And if we don't like the word faith, and we might not, the Pali word is saddha, the Sanskrit is shraddha, and it's often translated not as faith, but as determination, which is nice, right? I'm going to work hard to realize the answer to this burning question. It's also translated as confidence. And this is interesting because they have very different meanings, right? Faith seems to imply I have faith in something, and the implication is outside of myself. Like, I have faith in the Buddha, which is good, but it might easily become, please Buddha, save me. And I have sincerely announced this prayer many times, please save me, because I don't know how to save myself. It feels like that often. So faith could mean faith in something outside of ourselves, and that's part of what's uncomfortable, I think, for some of us that were burned by Judeo-Christian kind of God way out there kind of faith. Determination feels really different. Determination is like, whatever it takes, I'm going to do this. And that can be really personal. I'm going to sit on the cushion, I'm going to sit and walk, I'm going to go on retreat, I'm going to cultivate mindfulness and wise relationship and love in the heart. And that's a challenging task. But I'm going to do it. And I can do it. And we can do it together. And so determination has really a bright quality to it. Same word, saddha. Confidence is even better, I think. And confidence is one of the most wonderful translations for faith, for this word that we also translate as faith, saddha. Confidence is like, not only am I going to do it and are we going to practice, but we can do this and I can do this. And that confidence arises from somewhere. Where does it come from? Right? Feel it. You might take a moment and just feel into your own body, your own heart, the way that you feel yourself on a path, whatever that means to you. And ask yourself, do I have confidence in this path? Like, do you know in your heart of hearts that this thing you're doing, this path you're on, whatever it is, whether you call it Buddhist or anything else, that it leads to where you want to go? And there's a lot in here that we could talk a lot about, right? Because partly it means having some sense of where you want to go. If you don't know where you want to go, the beautiful poem by Ryokan, the Zen teacher, he says, it starts, Buddha is this mind, and the way goes nowhere. Don't look for anything but this. I'm sure some of you have heard this famous verse before. My teacher Eugene loves to teach on this verse. The Buddha is your own mind. First of all, this gets rid of the distance. There's no deity out there called Buddha. the Buddha is your mind. And of course the word Buddha just means awake. So wakefulness is your own true nature. And the way goes nowhere, right? There's no destination out there. The path is here. The arrival is here. Everything is right here. The path is all about presence. And then it says, don't look for anything but this, which is a totally paradoxical statement. Don't look for anything, except for this, which you should look for. But there's nothing to find. Good. This is really Zen teaching for you, right? Hopefully, it makes your mind kind of go, I don't know what to do with that, and kind of stop for a moment, and then you're present. It's good. But the place I want to get to in this verse is, the Buddha is your mind, the way goes nowhere, don't look for anything but this. But if you point your cart north when you want to go south, you will never arrive. So all of this is true about presence, and you got to point yourself in the right direction, right? So you come to practice and we say, great, just be present. Everything is perfect just as it is. But notice that when there's suffering, it means I'm actually dissatisfied. I'm being pulled out of the present. There are practices like mindfulness and concentration and loving kindness that we need to cultivate in order to walk this path that leads nowhere. But there's somewhere to get to. So, all of that said, confidence is a quality that arises when we hear the Dharma being taught, these teachings, or we meet someone who seems to manifest a kind of ease in the world, or center, or happiness that we long for. You meet a teacher, and there's just that intuition, like, whatever they're doing, I want to do it. You know, you feel somebody, and they're like, wow, that person just feels a little different than everyone else I know. Right? And it's considered in the Buddhist tradition a great, great blessing to meet people like that inspire your own confidence. Because confidence is what arises when you say, oh, you know what? If that guy can do it, I can do it. And this is dependent on realizing that that guy, that teacher, whoever it is, or that serious student who's manifesting dedication and maybe manifesting even the results of the path somehow. You can feel their kindness or their love or their presence. All of this is predicated on the realization that they're not better than you. They're not more divine. They're not more talented. Right? The Buddha was a guy. And he had doubts, and he had a body that ached. He had a bad back. He was a seeker who was just determined to find the way. So you realize the truth of suffering. It brings you to practice, to the path. Suffering leads to determination, or suffering leads to confidence. You start practicing, you get some hint that the path could be a good path for you, right? And upon practicing a little bit, you start to get like, oh, this sitting in stillness and kind of orienting to my own mind, my own heart, there's something there. And you start hearing the teachings, and you're like, you know what? I think this shit works. You know? And then you're like, well, I'm going to practice it. I'm going to do it. And in this list, then confidence or determination leads to the next quality, which is energy. Right? You get excited. You get inspired. Okay, that's it. We're going to do that. We're going to sit for half an hour. I'm not going to move. I'm going to deal with pain and wandering thoughts and lust and fear and anger. And threading through it all, there's this quality of like, and you know what? I think this is going to work. I think this is going to actually serve my life and my well-being in a really deep way. As that develops, then these qualities just start to weave together of your confidence in what's being offered to you, your own experience of a deepening presence, how it's beginning to manifest in your life, deeper and deeper recognitions of how suffering works, how satisfaction and dissatisfaction function. And there begins to arise then a quality that we can call faith or being devoted. So as that arises, then it becomes not so much like a religious feeling per se, like, oh, I've been born again and Jesus is my savior. And that's a really nice feeling if that's your path. But faith in this tradition then becomes a really beautiful, in a way, weaving between a delight in the tradition, a delight in the teachings, a delight in the whole frame that comes with this wisdom that begins to work in your own life. So that as we then practice more and more, we become devoted to the practice itself. We might become devoted to the Buddha, not as a god, but as the source of this that means so much to you. And in whatever way it does mean something to you, that coming here to this group has, saved your life in some way, or meeting a teacher has shown you that another way of living is possible, that's not drowning in dissatisfaction, in fear, in desire, and loss. When this arises really as a flame in the heart, I'll say, we begin to really take refuge. Refuge is one of the ways this tradition orients toward allowing something that seems like it's outside of ourselves, the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, that is actually inside ourselves. The Buddha is your own mind. But I can't always take refuge in my mind because it's pretty unreliable. It's a crazy man in there, mostly wandering around going, I like this, oh, I don't like that, I like that, I want this, I don't like this, I'm afraid of this, all of the turbulence of the mind. But when I need to, I can look up at a figure who, in the moment of greatest doubt, touched the earth and realized that he himself was capable of the highest freedom, and that if he can do it, I can do it. And that's refuge in our tradition. So then we might, right, and some folks love this kind of practice and some don't, we might express that refuge with our voices. And for those of you that are new to chanting, I'll encourage you to try it out, to sing loudly, to sing with a full breath and sit up tall. Just seeing what it's like to come into this kind of practice. And we'll start with a chant of refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, in the teacher, the teachings, and the path. That supports us on the path. And you might bring to mind as we begin something that you just love about meditation, about Dharma, about the Dharma community, about really anything that draws you here, and that in a moment of dark night you might turn to and say, wow, this life is challenging, but there's a light that shows the way. And I'm going to orient toward that light. So we'll sing in call and response. The words are traditional words in Pali. Buddham saranam gacchami, Dhammam saranam gacchami, Sangham saranam gacchami. And if you know them well, sing them particularly out. If you don't know them well, sing them out anyway. Making mistakes is fine. There's no such thing, really. The heart of this practice is to feel your own heart and your love for this, whatever that means to you. gacchami. Everybody. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Ti saranagamana nititam. Ti saranagamana nititam. Ti sarana means the three refuges. Gamana, we have gone. In translation, I go for refuge to the Buddha. I go for refuge to the Dhamma. I go for refuge to the Sangha. Based in refuge, this quality of the heart where I turn toward that which is greater than myself. So I turn to the community, the Sangha, because I need support to walk the path. I turn to the Dhamma, the teachings, because they really allow me not to have to discover it alone, not to have to make all the mistakes in the book to find my way. My teacher, our teachers, friends on the path, the texts, they say practice in this way. Bring the body to stillness. Allow the mind to settle. Orient the heart toward love. Bring mindfulness to all of our activities so that we train in presence, not being lost in thought, not being subject to or controlled by grasping, by aversion, by confusion. We go for refuge to the Buddha, which is your own mind or heart, or perhaps to the stories and the memory of and the teachings of this historical being. As this quality develops in us, and as it developed in the Buddhist tradition, it did become, in a way, cosmic. As happens, people practiced, people became liberated, people got really excited and fell in love with these teachings and this tradition, and started to realize things like the Buddha is your own mind. And if that's true, then it's not even so much about the historical Buddha, perhaps, but as Buddha as a quality of wakefulness, of presence, of extraordinary wisdom in the face of reality. And as that arose, then there arose traditions that did make the Buddha and the qualities of the Dharma into divine qualities. And religious imagination is incredible, right? And so, we go from this sense of the Buddha as like, here's this human being who woke up, to, well, okay, if Buddha is a quality that is beyond any particular being, then it must manifest in all sorts of ways, human ways, animal ways, divine ways. It must manifest as dream images. And then the devotional tradition of Buddhism begins to invent, or we could say dream up, in the course of intensive practice, images of the divine that become quite fantastic. So one of those images is the image of the Buddha in the feminine form. And it's valuable to include both physical sexes as possibilities for embodying realization, so that we can, in ourselves, feel all of those qualities. So feel masculine qualities of perhaps clear seeing or wisdom or pure consciousness, qualities considered masculine in some traditions, as well as qualities considered feminine in some traditions, like receptivity or compassion, or a kind of embodied interconnectedness, an almost erotic interconnectedness. The whole universe is the play of love. One of those forms in the Buddhist tradition comes to be named Tara, one of the embodiments of compassion in action. A simple story about Tara is that one of the bodhisattvas, or awakened beings, was meditating on infinite compassion, seeing beings suffering in all realms, and giving rise to the heart that longed for freedom. And that being, seeing the suffering of other beings, shed a tear. As that tear hit the earth, and again we have this connection to earth, and earth as goddess, earth as feminine. As the tear hit the earth, there sprang up out of the earth a miraculous being sitting on a lotus flower, leaping into action. And this becomes the bodhisattva, or goddess, if you like, that terminology, called Tara. And one of Tara's qualities is that she is imagined as the force in the heart that takes action out of compassion when faced with suffering. So you might, I'm sure, all know what it feels like to be in a moment of witnessing the suffering of someone, maybe a friend or a loved one, or more broadly, a whole class of people on the planet, and to be moved and to want to take action, to help, to serve, to eliminate that suffering. And so Tara is one word for that quality that arises in your heart when you're moved by compassion into taking action. That also means that when you need some help, she's there for you too. So to give us a sense of both qualities, both the early Buddhist quality of refuge and the somewhat later quality of really devotion to these kind of fantastic figures, we'll sing a little bit the mantra to Tara to close today. And after after there are announcements. I'll stick around for a little bit afterward if you have more. If you want to say hi or have any questions about devotional practice. It's really a pleasure to be with you today. So we'll sing this chant as our closing. It's the mantra to the goddess Tara or the Bodhisattva Tara. And this mantra is Om Tare, Tutare, Ture, Soha. Let's all just say that. Om Tare, Tutare, Ture, Soha. Om Tare, Tutare, Ture, Soha. Om Tare, Tutare, Ture, Soha. Everybody. Om Tare, Tutare, Ture, Soha. Om Tare, nature of community, the nature of the Dharma itself. May we find refuge in the teachings in whatever way moves us, serves us in this life. And may each of us and all beings everywhere find the end of suffering completely. Thank you so much for your warm hearts and kind attention.
Because of time, I'd like to express the appreciation of the Sangha for your presentation, Sean, and ask that you join Sean in the lobby with your appreciation, your comments or questions. He said he's made himself available. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Dana is a Sanskrit and Pali word meaning generosity or giving. In Buddhism, it also refers to the practice of cultivating generosity. This can be characterized by unattached and unconditional generosity, giving and letting go. GBF asks for a weekly donation of $10 or more to meet our monthly expenses. This includes our rent, the speaker honorarium, newsletter production, and mailing costs, and the Larkin Street Youth Center dinner. If you wish to see an itemized breakdown of our monthly expenses, they are listed on a card that can be viewed on the table. Our host will be coming around at the social time with our Dana Bowl. We appreciate your continued support that sustains this wonderful Sangha. And who's our host today?
I am your host today. So, welcome everyone. Thank you. Yes, there's a little something to eat out there. Please help yourself. There's hot water for tea. And we just ask that you wash your cup when you're finished in warm soapy water. Put that away. There's I think a sign-up sheet for those who want to get on the list of this Sangha. That's on the credenza. Check it out there. I will be walking around with the Dana Bowl. And many of us meet at 12:30 and head out to lunch. I think that's about it. So, thank you.
There's also a sign-up sheet for my own mailing list if you want to come and study or practice, and cards for my thing. So thank you again for everything. Yeah.
Are there any other announcements from the Sangha?
Another way to help the Sangha, we have an account at Community Thrift at 17th and Valencia. So if you have anything that no longer serves you that's sellable, take it over there, and we've been doing quite well with that. So that's another great way to support the Sangha. Thank you.
Tom?
Our printed newsletter is not here, but it will be available. Is it?
It's here.
Oh, it sure is.
There's someone in the box.
And it will also be available online as soon as I get back to my computer this afternoon. And I'll send out a note on that to our email list and Facebook and all that.
Yeah.
So a little more about our newsletter. Since there's a number of people here, new people here, I will talk about that for just a moment. One of our ongoing projects is a newsletter which we put out every other month. Today is newsletter mailing day. Newsletter typically includes a transcribed talk that we've had before, as well as a calendar and other things. And it's available online, which we prefer everybody to go on at gateboots.org. But we do send out paper copies to people who want them. This month we're sending out about 200 copies. About 2/3 of those go to prisoners and gay guys, I assume they're gay guys, in prisons all across the country who have limited or no access to the internet. And so that's a regular, ongoing commitment we have. So on the last Sunday of every other month, we have the printed copies here now, and after the social time, we get together in what I think of as kind of a spiritual quilting bee, where we stamp and label and fold and put into envelopes when necessary and all that stuff together afterwards out there around the couches. So if 8 or 10 guys can help with this, then we get it done real fast and efficiently, and you also have an opportunity to chat and gossip and with the other guys. So, I'd like to see hands for commitment for a few of those. That's great. Thanks very much.
Can you do that announcement?
Yeah. I'd like to invite you to a workshop that I'm going to be co-leading with the Lassiter diva Annie Golia. It's called Lightening Up About Relationships. And it's a workshop or a play shop on Saturday, February 8th in Oakland. We'll be using laughter yoga, meditation, and easy movement to help us get unstuck in places where we get snarled and stuck in patterns around relationships. And this is for anyone who's in any kind of relationship, not necessarily a romantic partnered relationship. Could be a work relationship, family relationship, friendship. And I'd be happy to talk with anyone who's interested during the social time. I'm Amos.
Are there any other announcements?
Who's our speaker next week?
I'm going to say it. No one trusts me anymore to say that because I miss it every time.
I just every
I'm kidding. I'm going to do
I'm guilty.
I'm going to do a we stood in a circle, but that's all right. I'll do it now. Everyone can be at ease. Next week's speaker is Baruch Golden. He's a longtime GBF member who has been practicing Vipassana meditation since 1998. Completed Spirit Rock's Community Dharma Leaders Program in 2012. He teaches Dharma in the Bay Area, and Baruch is also a registered nurse and has been doing hospice work for the past 14 years. So he'll be our speaker next week. I take it that was it for announcements. So also remember,
So there's a Buddhist book group that meets every Thursday night in New Castro, sponsored by us, participated in by some of us. We've just selected a new book, which we will be starting February 13th. We read a chapter a week, discuss each week, so it's ongoing every week. Dennis, can you remind me of the title that we just selected?
The title is Zen Confidential, Confessions of a Zen Buddhist Monk. Wayward Monk.
Yeah. It sounds quite interesting. We kind of browsed through it. So if anyone's inclined to start up, now would be a great time, so see me or Dennis afterwards.
thank you. Just remember that we have new and returning members today, and please welcome them in the social hour. If we could now gather in a circle to end this.
The recording device.
By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity, without too much attachment or too much aversion, believing in the equality of all that lives.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.